This one's apparently had a bit of a rough release for some reason. It initially hit some festivals back in 2017, but for whatever reason, it just now got an official digital release back in July, I believe. And when I first heard about it, it was just called Mercy too. So there appears to have been a change in the title as well. And I do actually like the new one better. It's just more descripting and fitting, I feel like. But what's the movie about? Well, it's essentially a love story. About these two women who happen to meet at this protest rally thing. Against the death penalty. Well, they're actually on the opposite sides of the fence on the issue. But they're both involved in the issue on a personal level as well. Which of course makes them coming together a little bit more unlikely. And it also creates some great tension and friction between the two. And yeah, the story essentially focuses on the two of them, with this whole court case dealing with the death penalty going on in the background. But I feel like that's just there for some context and to add a little bit of depth and complexity to the whole thing. To keep it interesting and to bring in some real drama with some real consequences. Because while this is ultimately a love story, I don't think that part could have really carried the whole movie. Simply because there's not that much to it. I mean, there's a little bit to it. There are some layers and some depth. It's not completely straightforward. But it's not enough to make the entire movie focus on that aspect alone. So it needed something more, and the other stuff going on in the background did exactly that. And it did actually make me think about the death penalty a little bit. But I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole here, because that's just way too big of an issue to go into. But needless to say, it's a very complicated issue that's definitely not black and white. And the movie does dive into that a little bit as well, although I don't feel like it really dwelled on it too much. It also took more of a personal approach to it. What it's like dealing with it when it affects you on a personal level. Instead of going into it from like a moral or ethical standpoint. And while I do think that played a significant role in the story here, the heart of the story is absolutely the central relationship and the love story. That's what it's really about, and that's what made me care. And while I do think Ellen Page did a decent job here, to me, Kate Mara is absolutely the star of the show here. Well, first of all, I think they had really good chemistry, they worked great together. But I do feel like Kate Mara did the heavy lifting there. And she's essentially what made this whole thing work for me. She was just so incredibly charming and likable in this. Which is pretty much the polar opposite of Ellen Page's character. Or well, maybe that's not completely fair, I guess she did have this rebel charm to her as well. I kinda liked her because she went against the grain and wasn't afraid to stand up for herself or to speak her mind. But yeah, I still wouldn't call her necessarily charming or likable. She was a bit of a bummer too, you know? Didn't have the most positive outlook on life, which was completely understandable, but the contrast to Kate Mara's more upbeat character was also pretty stark. Now when it comes to the technical execution of the movie as a whole, I didn't really have any genuine issues with it, but nothing really stood out as being all that exceptional either. And while it did definitely have some depth to it, and I think the love story worked, overall, I thought this one was just sort of fine, but nothing too special. Perfectly watchable, but I'm not sure if it's gonna stick with me for a long time. So how about it? Would I recommend it? Sure, but I wouldn't call it a must-see or anything. So I don't know, maybe give it a look-see, or maybe don't. After all, I'm not your dad. But hey, what are your thoughts on this? Have you seen it? Did you like it? Let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, maybe give it a thumbs up or sub to the channel, because that would be fantastic. And if you'd like, you can also support me on Patreon or PayPal through the links in the description. And as always, I appreciate you and thanks for watching.